Good evening, everyone. Welcome. It is such an honor and a privilege to be here, to be in your community, and what a delight to be here with all of you. Let's give it up for the symphonic strings one more time, please. I'd like to start with a story, if I could. There was a time when I went to a place called the Patton State Hospital, about 70 miles east of Los Angeles, and I was playing for an audience of about 300 people who were all incarcerated due to a severe mental illness. They had committed a crime due to a severe mental illness. And I went there and I performed about 15 minutes of unaccompanied music by Johann Sebastian Bach, the same composer you just heard. And it was one of those rare times as a performer that I actually thought the performance was going well. And I expected a decent round of applause from the audience, and when I finished, I got nothing. Crickets. And a gentleman in the middle of the room, he stood up, he was wearing a brown jumpsuit, and he looked at me and he said, "Son, don't you know any songs we know?" And then immediately, what came to mind was the theme song from Titanic, and then how there could not possibly be a worse piece of music to play in a state hospital than the Titanic theme song. And so I completely floundered. I had no idea what to say, I had no idea what to play. And I think he took pity on me, and he started to sing. And he sang a song I had never heard before. He sang a song called Jesus on the Main Line. And it's a gospel song. And the words go, "Jesus is on the main line, call him up and tell him what you want. If you're down and out and want to get out, tell him what you want." And what I realize now, years later, is that what this man was asking for was not less music by Bach. What he was asking for was not to be entertained. He was asking to be seen. He was asking to be accepted and cherished for his story. So in my culture, I say to all of you tonight, namaste, namaskar. Because in my culture, in the Hindu tradition that I grew up in, I see that the divinity that resides within me resides within every single one of you. And so it is from that place that we are able to truly see each other and make music for and with each other. And so it is with all of that welcome that I remember stories of my family. I grew up in a Bengali family, and Bengalis, if you can't notice from my presence on stage, love two things. We love music and we love food. And I remember my mother is an amazing cook, and she would cook me fish curry and lamb keema, and she would send me to school with fish curry. And I'd promptly throw it out. Because there's nothing worse than opening up aluminum-wrapped fish curry and having the entire cafeteria smell like coriander and turmeric and delicious fish curry, and I'd eat pizza instead. And I think I felt that way about my culture for a long time. That my culture was something that we had at home, but when we got to school, we threw it out. And that it brings tears of such joy to my eyes to be on the stage with so many incredible musicians and to see so many musicians from my own Desi tradition, to see so many of your faces in this room is truly restorative to the soul of a little 9-year-old boy who really didn't know if this day was possible. So I'm so deeply grateful to you for seeing us and welcoming us into your community. Namaste.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for welcoming us. I was thinking the same thing as Vijay when I was sitting in the audience listening to this wonderful orchestra play the Brandenburg Concerto, and thinking, I spent most of my life training as a Western classical musician. I grew up as a pianist, I became a composer, and you know, both of us have been to these elite music schools and have spent a lot of time just honing our craft as Western musicians. But the entire time that I was in school, every competition I played, every recital I played, every time I was on a concert with other composers, I felt my difference. And I just remember thinking, you know, am I the only crazy one? Am I the one? Did everyone else get it right and did I get it wrong? And, you know, it's been amazing working with these wonderful students because you see the amount of cultures they come from and the amount of you know, the world that they represent. And, you know, they are able to bring so much of their culture into the music they make in a way that I never was when I was their age. So this has been deeply, deeply restorative for both of us to spend time with all of you. So one of the ways that I dealt with that feeling that I had a family that was one culture, and you know, I had my career, which is another culture. I thought to myself, gosh, it would be amazing if I could actually make music with people who shared my culture. And at that point, the only people who shared my culture and made music made a really different kind of music. And so wanting to build relationships with people in my own Indian culture is what led me, after many years of being a professional composer, actually to study Indian classical music. And so much of what I do between these two cultures is to bring musicians and the music of these cultures a little bit closer together. And I thought, gosh, what a better place than Naperville, which has the confluence of these two cultures so beautifully. It's already here, you know, there's nothing for me to do. I'm just looking at all of you and thinking, wow, we've done it, we've made it to here. So that is the piece. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But I write this kind of music sometimes for Indian and Western musicians to perform together, and sometimes for one or the other group to get a window into that other culture. Because I think the thing is, there are so many ways our world is getting smaller and so many ways we're being asked to relate to one another. But a lot of those ways are zero-sum games. You know, if you get these resources, I don't get these resources. You know, there are places where we feel like we have to fight with each other. And I think music is a place where it's not a zero-sum game, where basically we can, if you enjoy a concert, it's not like the person sitting next to you will enjoy that concert less. In actual fact, what might happen is that a discussion might happen, a relationship might be built. And that's what I love about being a musician, is that I can engineer these spaces where I can decide who I want to be on the stage, who I want to make music together, and how I want those people to relate to one another. And whether I want them to compete with one another, whether I want them to ignore one another totally, or really whether I want them to work together and to see that their collaboration is the only way that music is possible. And then that leads you into these deeper discussions of how our collaboration in this world is the only way that our world will continue to be possible. So what I'd like Vijay to play for you a piece that I wrote it's a solo violin partita that's actually in the style of the Bach partitas. But this partita is called Darshan. And for those of you who speak Hindi, you'll know that Darshan means seeing, vision. And it means the seeing, for us it meant the seeing of one another, the seeing of our own cultural tradition. But it also means the seeing of God. You would go to a temple to see God. So this is it's in an Indian raga called Charukeshi, and I will sing a little bit of it for you, and then I'll let Vijay take it away.
Overwhelming. Overwhelming to play and to be so heard. We're going to transition now into playing a piece of music called a concerto. And for many years, I was a member of the first violin section of an elite orchestra called the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra. Of course, as a Desi kid whose last name is Gupta, I was expected to be a doctor by my parents. And I was very lucky to study neuroscience. I was very lucky to study in labs, specifically working on understanding spinal cord regeneration and understanding Parkinson's disease. But I'd be in these labs where I'd be surrounded by these top scientists, and it seemed all they wanted to talk about was music. And they said, if you ever had the capacity to be a musician, what on earth are you doing here? Go be a musician. And so I joined the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and I was met by this family of musicians. And I started a project called Street Symphony, which brings music to people disenfranchised by homelessness and incarceration. At the end of last year, I actually made the difficult decision to leave the Los Angeles Philharmonic, not only to focus on the work of Street Symphony, but truly to understand and cultivate my own voice as a musician. And it has been in working with Reena, in working on learning ragas like Charukeshi and Jog and Bhimbalasi and Hamsadvani, all these amazing millennia-old ragas of our own Hindustani tradition that I've began to find my own artistic voice somehow in my own culture. And so Darshan was kind of my first entrance into understanding Hindustani music, but truly through the lens of what it means to be a violinist who's played for over 28 years of my life.
You know, one of the things that is great about music and great about being a composer specifically is that it allows you to ask questions, and it allows you to play those questions out and see how they work in real life. And you know, sometimes those questions are about notes and rhythm. Sometimes those questions are like, oh, what harmony should go here? Or like, how long should this section be? But I always tried to ask questions that were a little bit further out. So, you know, in the case of, you know, Vijay and I worked together at Street Symphony for so many years, and we would ask the question, I would ask the question as a composer, you know, what does it mean when someone can't attend a bunch of rehearsals, you know, how they can't make to that commitment because they're literally fighting for their life, right? How do you make a piece of music? How do you use your training to make a piece of music that actually allows them to participate and allows the piece to go on? Because if our training is not to ask questions that are broader than just, you know, within that small world of music, then, you know, why are we artists? That's our job, to see the world as it is and imagine the world as we want it to be and try to find a way to get it there. And so a question that had been sitting with me for a really long time was a question of the concerto. So any of you who have been to Western classical concerts will know that a concerto usually means that there's a soloist that stands on the front of the stage with their back facing the orchestra for the entire time, and that person is the highlighted person, and the orchestra's job is to support the soloist. And I always just thought, I wonder what would happen if I tried to write a piece where the soloist's job and the soloist's responsibility was actually to support the musicians as much as the musicians supported them. And so I thought then, who can I ask this question with? And I thought it would be amazing to ask this question with young people who have not yet made the agreement that they're going to just support someone, that they're going to play in an orchestra, that if they want to be a musician, these are the things that have to happen. You know, they're still growing and they're still asking questions about their own destiny, where they belong in the world, and specifically for this generation of people, how they can matter. And they've grown up in a world where there's been so much turmoil, and I see in all of them this desire to make careers that have meaning and to be meaningful citizens that make change in the world. And so I think about this idea of mutual support. And so that's what brought about Concerto for You. Concerto for You is for all of them. It's not just for the soloist. It's for every single person who reads that on the front of their score. So I think actually without further ado, we're just going to play this Concerto for You. So here we go.
This is the world premiere. You are the first audience. You are the first audience to hear this work. So thank you for being part of this gift. So you know that that can't be it. That was a lot of fun.
So, since this is the first time anyone had ever heard this piece, we thought we would give you a little bit of context for the piece, and we would show you, sorry, I realize I'm not talking into the mic. Now, that's better. There we go. We'll give you a little bit of context for the piece. We'll play little parts of it for you. And then we'll maybe let you hear it again. So, let's see. I want to start with movement 1. This piece is in 3 movements. So one of the first things you hear is all of the violin section. They're starting to, and yeah, Mr. Schweigler, if you want to come back and be the conductor. They start out with this phrase, or this gesture, where they have a really long violin line, and then they have a little like at the end. And you can hear each one of them as they do that little shimmer at the end. And I think of it as if there's this very vast sky, and there are these little stars in it, and you can hear the stars. So if you want to maybe just, yeah. So you hear that sound, that each of them are contributing to this really beautiful texture, and then they're also each their own individual person. They each have that little moment to shine, and so I just like the way that starts. When Vijay starts the concerto, he's sitting actually in the orchestra, actually right next to the violas, and they play this melody. And I'll let them play it for you first, and then I'll sing a little bit of it for you. Yeah. It's beautiful. So that comes from an Indian raga called Hamsavani. And when I hear it, I hear one of the more ornamental versions that Vijay plays later. It goes, ah, ah, this, I actually initially had set it in a piece for choir that never quite got written. And so this is the only version of it that exists in my actual writing. But I set a text that's actually part of a Catholic prayer. And the line is, "Give us this day our daily bread, panem nostrum quotidianum." And I was thinking, this raga is so intimate. And it just is this idea of, what is our daily bread? Our daily bread is the thing that keeps each of us going. And maybe it's not actual bread. Maybe there's just that element. Maybe it's our family. Maybe it's our work. Maybe it's music, And so just when playing this, I'm thinking a lot about, what is that daily bread for each one of us? And then at the end, you'll see that Vijay is sitting in this group of people, all who are the principal and associate principal players, and there's a quintet between them. And you'll see they just make eye contact with each other as they start to play. And I'm going to put these wonderful soloists on the spot and ask them maybe to just play the first few measures so you can hear them all play. So you can hear it's like a little chamber group in the middle of this orchestra, and everyone's looking at each other, and everyone's having this moment of, hey, we're all just making music together here. And I think it's beautiful that within an orchestra you can have these really intimate moments of connection with one another. Did you want to say anything? Sure. Yeah.
One of the things that is kind of inherent in the Western classical orchestral system is obviously hierarchy. And this is actually an element of this piece that we wanted to tease out and challenge, because we know that every single one of the musicians on this stage practices very hard, that they love what they do, but that is it true that we assign more worth to the musicians sitting in the front than to those in the back? And as a professional musician, this sort of hierarchy becomes incredibly painful. That somehow if we didn't win the auditions because we weren't good enough, that we are not good enough, that we're not enough. And so this piece actually allows all of us on stage, including myself, to kind of challenge what those hierarchies are. And what I love in the first movement is the idea of really being fed by connection.
So moving on to the second movement, speaking of moving to the back of the orchestra, I was thinking a lot about the basses and how a lot of times the basses just kind of get to play a few pizzas or a few long notes, or they're playing along with the cellos. And I thought, gosh, if the basses were just left to their own devices, what would they actually do? And so I said, I'm just going to compose something where the basses really get to be the soloists here. And then Vijay is with them, and he gets to make music with them. So the entire time, either he's literally playing what they're playing with them, or he's kind of riffing off them. So let's just hear that very opening section. And then you hear, the rest of the orchestra has just had a chance to listen to them, and then they will riff off they'll riff off the bass section as well. So maybe we'll quickly do B, just the orchestra. Or sorry, let's do A. Sorry, I missed my. Just when the strings come in. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes, sorry, A. So you'll often hear basses in jazz playing like that, playing pizzicatos, and it's something that is very groovy, and I thought, why don't we give everyone a chance to just groove a little bit and enjoy themselves? So I almost imagine, the violins can't do this, but I imagine the violins, in their hands, and they're just kind of strumming along. Let's see. So the middle section of this is actually an homage to the other piece that they played, the Brandenburg Concerto. So it has this really kind of intense driving feel that is the case in Bach. So if you just maybe we'll just play at C so you can hear how that sounds like the Bach. Anything you want to say about the second movement?
What I love about this movement is how it sort of is evocative in the violin part of all kinds of fiddle music. That you kind of hear Irish fiddling, you hear Appalachian fiddling, but of course you hear Hindustani fiddling as well.
Nice. So moving on to the last movement, This actually is based in the same Indian raga as the solo piece that Vijay played in Charukeshi. And one of the things that I love about it is it has a darkness and a lightness about it, just both within that same scale. So what I'll have you do is just play at E to the cadenza so we can hear that melody. And just... I just want to point out how remarkable it is that you can get this many people to just start playing at any measure of music I mean, like, they're doing this on the spot. We haven't rehearsed this. So, I mean, just take a moment to think about what these amazing young people are doing. And this is what comes, I mean, they do this every morning. I mean, this is just, it's incredible. This is the only melody that actually comes from another piece that I wrote, and it was actually a piece for people exactly this age, the San Francisco Girls Choir, who are high school singers. And I set this text, which is from a Native American poet, Linda Hogan. And it's it's just one line that has been just, people have been saying a lot. And it's, "You are the result of the love of thousands." And I think about that. Every single one of us is here because of thousands of people, and it's not just necessarily our ancestors and the people who made us, but you know, each one of the people on the stage is here because of some of you in the audience, because of their teachers, because of their friends, and I think, you know, this reflection goes, "You are the result of the love of thousands, of thousands and thousands." And that's how the choral version of it goes. And I just wanted that to be embedded, and that message to really be embedded in this piece, that we are here because of a community. And I just wanted to point out how the piece ends. And this was actually my very first idea for the piece, that Vijay begins to walk through the violins, and each one of them, stand by stand, you'll notice they'll stop playing and they'll put their instrument down. And this wonderful last violinist has this, of the first violin section, has an amazing solo that ends the piece. And I mean, for me, that is the continuation, that the piece doesn't end, it doesn't begin and end with the same person. It begins and ends with the next generation of violinists. So, so that is the piece, and you know what we're gonna do since we've talked about it? We're just gonna play it for you again. Here we go.
so glad we're doing this again. So that's our program for this evening. We just wanted to take a moment to do some acknowledgments. First of all, to Symphonic Strings. What an amazing job. To all the teachers, all the parents, what you have witnessed tonight is truly singular. I've had the pleasure of playing with many professional ensembles, and I would never put them through this. The way that this ensemble has responded and adapted and offered their artistry and their hearts and souls to us is something truly remarkable. Please give them another round of applause. A great ensemble requires an equally great leader, and we found that in Greg Schwegler. At one point in the rehearsals, Greg actually handed Reena a copy of her own score that he had annotated, with more detail than it had been composed. And so we're so deeply grateful to Greg. We would not be here without the incredible work of the organization ARTSpeaks. We are so deeply grateful to their board of directors, to all of you who have supported us tonight, but we truly wouldn't be here without our dear friend Chip Staley. Thank you so much, Chip, for having us. Greg was saying earlier that Chip actually wrote the purchase orders for the chairs on which the students sit every morning to practice and have their orchestral rehearsals. He has truly built the community that we all get to celebrate today, and we are so deeply grateful to him. To Reena, what an honor and privilege and delight it is to work with you every single day. And to all of you for giving both of us the opportunity to really have this moment of darshan with all of you. We are so honored to be welcomed again and again into your community, and thank you so much for having us.
And I would also say, of course, thank you to Vijay, who really inspired this concerto, because I look at the way that he interacts with young people and the way that he's interacted with this ensemble, not just what you're seeing with him sitting with them, but the way that he's been able to give them just so much advice and so much inspiration, practical things and really big, inspiring ideas. This concerto would not have been written the way it was written if it wasn't for his generosity and of spirit and in his music. So, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight.